Gentlemen, as we said before we went to the break, who's been on the show many, many times. Very happy to have him back again. Monte Dutton joins us. Hey, Monte, welcome back to the show.
Hey, nice to hear your voice, Steve. Hello, Charlie.
Hi, Monte. How you doing, man?
I'm fine.
That's good. So what did you think of this past weekend? The votes are in or seem to be in, and most of the votes are saying this is one of the best NASCAR stock car races in many years. You on the side of that argument, or which side of that argument are you on, I guess?
Well, I enjoyed the race. I don't think I saw where someone had compared it to the 1979 Daytona 500. I think that was a bit much.
Yeah.
I think, though, that I think just there's all kinds of things that happen in life where you think you'd never see them, and I think it's entirely possible that when all is said and done, that might be considered the best race of the season, because it may not be the best race on the track, and it may not be the best off the track, but between on and off together, it may well be the best spectacle, the most interesting, the most talked about race of the year, and for the track at Auto Club Speedway, that's a bit unusual.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it really blew away our whole show from last week. If anybody goes back to listen to our show from last week, all we did was complain about how usually the racing there is so poor, the fan turnout is so poor, this is poor, that is poor, and as it turned out, as you say, it may well have been the race that proves everybody wrong, one of the best races I think I've ever seen from out there.
Sure. I mean, it was that just goes to show you. I mean, there's no guarantee. You can have a real stinker at a track where the races are always good, and you can have a great race at places that aren't as conducive to that. And I think also, one thing that I was right about is that with all of the, everybody, not just in NASCAR, but in sports in general, overreacts to everything. Mm-hmm. The last thing in the world that you ever see is perspective from fans, from broadcasters, from writers alike. I know that one of the things that always frustrates me about the social media is this business of having to have everything immediately, and you lack perspective. I know that I try really hard when something happens to sit back and think about it a while and then write something substantial and not try to get carried away. And I have been watching racing for an awful long time. It had all sorts of controversy, and I think it's just like everything else, most people think that their guy is the one who tells it like it is, and the guy they don't like is a whiner.
Mm-hmm.
Or to some extent or other. And so when you read the comments about it, about the positions, why, there's kind of no middle ground, whether you're talking about Joey Logano or Tony Stewart. I think the basic thing that happened in the race is that Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin were so conscious of each other and their rivalry that they gave the race away.
Yep.
Number one. And I think it's quite interesting that there's probably no one in NASCAR who over the span of his career has lost more races that he should have won than Kyle Busch. And for once, the law of averages caught up a little bit for him.
Don't you think
he's in the right spot?
As you were watching, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but as you were watching the end of that race, didn't you get the feeling that that's exactly what was going to happen, that the two of them were eventually going to take themselves out of this thing, and then, not necessarily Kyle Busch, but somebody was going to come back and win that thing other than those two?
Well, that was certainly a distinct possibility, and that's why you were watching so closely. And then on the other thing, in regard to Tony Stewart, I'm just going to tell you, one of the things that just amazed me is, first of all, everybody immediately said Tony Stewart's one to talk. He blocked and people at Talladega. But if you look at it going back his whole career, Stewart has always held that blocking is inevitable, unavoidable, unfortunate, but it's one of the things he doesn't like about plate racing. But he's basically said that blocking is despicable at any other kind of track. Now, whether you think that's right or wrong, when Tony Stewart on that restart, when Logano moved down once and then Stewart went to the edge of the track and he moved down again, what that did to Stewart is it taught he had to get completely out of the gas, and that's why he dropped like a rock.
Right.
So as a long-time observer of Tony Stewart, I was 100% sure that he would not take it well. And so what happened after the race did not surprise me in the least, because, when I saw what happened on the racetrack, Darrell Walter said, I don't know what Tony's angry about. I said, Darrell, were you not watching? Because that didn't surprise me at all, because, I wrote a book about Tony Stewart, and I've been a long-time observer of his, and he and I had our ups and downs, but I feel like I know him pretty well. And I've always said that you can read Tony by his eyes. You couldn't prove it by a photograph, maybe, but when Tony Stewart goes into that rage, his eyes turn black as coal in my mind. And so when I saw that happen, I know exactly. I said out loud, sitting at home in the living room, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Because I knew something was going to happen, because I know Tony Stewart. And what he's doing, and by the way, if there was ever, Tony Stewart grew up idolizing A.J. Foyt. If that wasn't vintage A.J. Foyt, I've never seen anything. I've never seen it.
What's your opinion as a longtime observer? And this is we're talking to Monte Dutton of the sport, about Tony's opinion on blocking at tracks other than plate tracks. I mean, is it?
Well, I do think
to me, it seems to be.
I do think it's different. I mean, plate races are the only ones where it's like the cars are going around the track with the cruise control set on 190. I mean,
right.
It's not about getting in and out of the gas. It's not about the seat of the pants racing. They are fundamentally different. And I think that if you drive at a plate race and you don't sit there and play chess and move over at the right time and all that, then, I mean, I think it's pretty much unavoidable. Now, I think that each person has to make the call for themselves as to whether blocking is proper on other kinds of tracks. But what I'm saying is, it's easy to disagree, and you may not agree with that. But I think it's overly simplistic to say that one action at one track. First of all, when Stewart caused the wreck at Talladega, he wasn't out of the car before he took full blame for it. I mean, you can't say he messed up. I mean, he said he messed up and he was wrong and all that. I mean, a lot of times at races, most of the crashes at the plate tracks occur because someone tries to stick his car into a hole that's not big enough for it to make it. And so, whether you agree with it or not, I think it's overly simplistic to not only just say, I mean, and then the other thing, of course, is that people say, well, if Tony had been in the same situation Logano was, would he'd have done the same thing? Well, I think you have to go by what happened, not what might have happened or what happened somewhere else, because every track is different and all that. So I'm not saying Tony was right. I'm just saying that that's Tony Stewart, and that's what he thinks is right. And so, there was, whether I agree with it or not, there was no doubt in my mind that pretty much what happened after the race was going to happen, and that I really enjoyed. I got a tremendous chuckle out of it.
So did we.
In terms of Logano, I would defend him in this instance. I think sometimes it's unfortunate that people's opinions are jaded by what happened. I think, basically from looking at the replay, I think that Logano was mildly at fault for the crash with Hamlin. Both of their unwillingness to yield, for obvious reasons dating back for a while, caused the wreck. But I do think that Logano sort of moved over to blunt Hamlin's time. But he wasn't trying to wreck him, and he didn't know that the car was going to go head on into a wall that wasn't a soft wall. And I think that's part of the risk that freak things happen in racing. It's certainly not anybody's fault. I mean, like, and when you sit there and you say this is awful, only because someone got hurt.
Right.
The goal wasn't to get someone hurt, and so I think that Logano's only won a couple of races, and he's and at the age of 22, it's like everyone predicted. He has suffered from raised expectations that dated back to when I first heard people marveling about Joey Logano. He was 12 years old, and Martin was championing his cause. So I think that, as I said, I think that Hamlin and Logano, the basic thing that happened was they got so caught up in their own rivalry that they blew the race. And I think it's terribly unfortunate that Hamlin was hurt. But I don't think that the fact that Hamlin is hurt was. I think that maybe the wreck was. But I think it's again simplistic and just plain wrong to to give Logano this sort of bloodthirsty rap because he was in a wreck that someone else got hurt in.
Well,
Just like it wasn't fair to Sterling Marlin in the crash that claimed Dale Earnhardt's life. That's what when you go into racing, it's a dangerous profession, and that's just something that can happen, and it's not anybody's fault.
We're talking with Monte Dutton, and the one thing, Monte, that I really didn't agree with as far as what Tony Stewart, part of his rant, was about Joey Logano and the rich, little rich kid getting the ride, and I can't see that Joey Logano would be in that 22 car for Penske Racing if all he had to bring to the plate was a rich little kid, because the sponsorship from Shell was already there. That's the part that kind of bothered me about Tony's rant. Now, whether that just came off the top of his head because that's all he had to give, I don't know.
That's complicated because you can make that arrangement long term. You can make that charge or defend it long term or short term. I know that there are a lot of people. I mean, I think that Logano was a kid who came along and got everything it took to get ahead. I know of a close friend and colleague who tried to do a story on Logano when he was in his early teens, and he went to a Legends race, and Logano had a tractor trailer, and everybody else was pulling their cars in on flatbed trailers, and he tried to do an interview, and at the age of 13 or something, Logano had an entourage of PR people who shielded him from everybody, and they roped off his area. I think that Logano, in some ways, I've always felt a little bit of pity for Logano. Here's a kid who came up. He never went to school. He never went to he was homeschooled. He was sheltered. And when he was 18, a lot of people were talking about it's amazing he's 18, he's at this level. And I thought it was amazing that he was 18, and you could have confused him from being 14 when you talked to him.
Right.
So I do think that I think it's a fair thing to say that Logano got every benefit you can have, and I think maybe what he didn't develop was the toughness that comes from lifting yourself up by your bootstraps. But I mean, who would turn that down? Who would turn down the opportunities that he was afforded? So I mean, he's a talented kid, and he's actually, who the young Logano reminded me of is that when my first year covering NASCAR full time was Jeff Gordon's first year, and I can tell you, Jeff Gordon has come a long way. Mm-hmm. When he was 21 years old, I thought it was the most frustrating thing in the world because every time you asked him a question, he seemed like a robot. He said exactly what you knew he was going to say when you asked the question.
Yeah.
And Jeff Gordon now is one of the most honest, insightful people in the sport, and he's come a long way, and so too will Joey Logano.
Do you get any different perspective? We've got about a minute left, Monte. You have any different perspective on this circus as you sit there and not follow it week in and week out?
Well, I think so. I think that when you watch the races, if I was at the race, I would be looking through binoculars, using a stopwatch, sitting up in the press box, watching everything. It's the very reason that I never like to cover the race from the infield, because I don't like for TV to dictate what I see. And I think my view of it is more skewed because I tend to be more frustrated at what the announcers say. If, I tend to be more critical. So it's very different. And also this year, this business about, you can't denigrate the product. You can't be honest. Right. I think that all of my colleagues who are covering the race are very frustrated because everybody's afraid to death, afraid to speak their mind. So I didn't really miss not being there until this weekend. I like it when all hell breaks loose. Yeah. I always thought I did my best work. So I wish that I was in California. And I had a little bit of twinge watching the Bristol race. But in view of what has happened this year in terms of the relationship between NASCAR and the media, I think it was, if there's a good time to lose your job, this was it.
All right.
Do you have any plans to get out to any of the races, Monte? Are you going to be doing any freelance work that you know of, or are you working on some of that?
I don't think I'll be at the racetrack unless there is I do this, I write for a living, and so if I can't make a living doing it, I'm not just going to go out of sentimentality. So I'm trying to move on with other areas. I'm still writing blogs on my website, and people tell me people have the ridiculous notion that I'm writing better than I ever have there. But I think there's a certain benefit from distance. But I'm actually, if I can figure out a way to make a living, I'll be happy.
How's the new book coming?
The new book will be out in November. It's I'm working on a third book, and the goal is that for all those things to kind of compound, and then the second book, having the first one built momentum, I think the publisher thinks and my agent think that the second book is going to be more commercial than the first one, and then I'm having a lot of fun writing the other one. So it's just a matter of building a reputation as not being a guy who wrote a novel, but being a guy who writes novels.
Yep. Well, good luck. You're certainly one of the most talented writers that I read regularly, and I don't know if you're writing better than you were. You're writing a little different than you were, and I enjoy it. And we enjoy.
Not bad, so people are surprised.
Well, we enjoy having you on the show, and glad you're still into it enough to join us and talk about it, because your insight's always terrific.
I'm still going to write about it. I'm still interested. I'm just not going to write 4 stories a day.
There you go.
There you go.
Unless there's money, unless there's a check to do it for.
That's right. That's the only way to do it. Monte, thanks so much. We'll talk to you again, man.
Thanks for having me.
All right,
Monte
Dutton. All right, we need to take a break, and when